Hello, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking about proclaiming your divorce decision and how to prepare for it. And so, I'm going to go over for you a number of different categories. What is the goal of this statement that you're making? What do you say? What is included in that statement and what is not included? When do you schedule saying this and do you schedule it? How actually do you say it once you know what you want to say? And then how do you prepare for letting them know that you want to talk to them? And then how do you prepare for the your safety and the potential emotional fallout? And then we're going to talk at the end about some of their reactions and how you can avoid misinterpreting them. So let's start with what is the goal of telling? The saying that I've always heard is, I'm asking my spouse for a divorce. So is it? Is it a request? I'm going to have the divorce conversation. Is it a dialogue? Do you feel you need to defend your reasons why? I would suggest that it is a proclamation that you have finally made this decision and your goal is to communicate your decision. Period. Hard stop. So, with that as a foundation, let's look at what do I say? A lot of people come to me talking about this and they want to defend their decision. And in order to defend your decision, you have to highlight all of the shortcomings or heartbroken experiences or displeasing behavior of your spouse. And you've already done that. You've had those conversations. You've asked for change. You've gone back and forth. So this isn't the time for that. It's not about what's wrong with them or what's wrong with the marriage. This is a statement of decision. And so you want to determine what you want to say in terms of keeping it in the eye and that you've made this decision. And it's going to be very brief. And again, it doesn't highlight their shortcomings. The not to say is you don't want to judge them. You don't want to judge them. You don't want to tell them what's wrong with them. You don't want to tell them how many chances you gave them. That is not going to allow for an effective, clear message to be delivered. At this point, it is about we've been at this for a while. We've made various attempts to mend. And at this point, I've realized and decided. And so it's very succinct. The other thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to get into negotiating, which they may want to. Their immediate trigger of fight, flight, or freeze, and I've seen this happen so many times, maybe that here you plan on telling them a decision, and all of a sudden you're talking about parenting time and who's going to get the marital home and what's going to happen to the finances. Absolutely not. This is not the time for any of those conversations. And so you want to have a canned response to anything like that. Those are all real. There's going to be a lot of big and important decisions that we have to make. Today is not that day. Today, I just want to let you know that this is the decision I've made. So it's a proclamation, not a request or a conversation. It's succinct. The clearer you can be, the better. For those of you who are conflict averse, I've been thinking that maybe we might want to try to separate is not a good statement. The more wishy-washy you are, the more you leave open the possibility that maybe you won't divorce, the more pushback you're going to get, and you're going to have a hard time with that. So you want to be clear, you want to be decided, and you want to deliver that. And then when do you say it? And so I had interviewed a therapist years ago who said, you really want to always give someone a heads up. So I'd like to have a conversation with you. Can we talk after the kids are out of the house on Saturday? And that sounds great because now you're not sideswiping them and they know you want to have an important conversation. The problem with that for some of you is that will kick off something in your spouse where you will be dogged until that time. What is this about? Tell me I want to talk about it now. And so, with everything that anybody gives you in terms of a rule of thumb, you have to determine what you know about your spouse and what you know about yourself. And so, if you can schedule a time to talk, do that. When you just walk into a room and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you," this is a really hard conversation, and your spouse may feel very sideswiped and even more reactive. And on the other hand, it may be the only way you can do it, only you know. And so that's the how to prepare for it is, do I give them a heads up and schedule a time? And then back to how do I say it? There is a statement you've heard from me many times, BIF, brief, informative, firm, and friendly. An example would be, as I started saying earlier, you and I have been talking about the problems in our relationship. I've been sharing with you my concerns. We've gone to marriage counseling. Nothing seems to be working. And I've made the decision to divorce. And I wanted to let you know that. And then you get quiet and you don't say anything else. And what I want you to know is going to happen with your spouse is their ears are going to start ringing. They've now got this full cortisol overflow. They've gone from their frontal cortex to their amygdala. They're in fight, flight, or freeze. And so they could do a lot of different things. It's really important that you understand the various stages of grief. Not that grief is linear, any one of them could come up, but know what they are. So if somebody starts saying, oh, you're just going through a midlife crisis, or you must have a guy or a gal or whatever, right, they're either bargaining or they're in denial. They could just break down and start crying and they're devastated and I can't believe you're doing this and how could you give up on us? Or they could get really angry and say mean and nasty things. Any one of those are also, that is grief. That is grief coming to the surface. It may be their displeasing personality as well. But understanding that when you deliver a message, like this is the greatest transition any of us ever go through. You deliver a message like this, it is going to have an impact. And I want you to be prepared, to be expecting that impact so that you know what to do. And the next thing we want to talk about is when you're choosing, right? So I'm choosing, let's say we're going to tell Saturday morning, you're either giving notice or you're not. There are other things you need to do to prepare for it. Are you safe? And so, with a lot of clients, we talk about, do you need a safety person who's sitting in the kitchen while you're talking in the living room, or a friend who's outside in their car? With my higher conflict situations, do you want to go down to the police station and let them know that you're delivering this message, that there's been a lot of abuse, and they may get a 911 call? Only you know, but being prepared, fully prepared is really important. Are they safe? And I was coaching with this one woman whose spouse was struggling with alcoholism or an addiction. And we talked about what will he need once this happens, because her plan was to then leave. We'll get to that in a minute. And so there may be a friend or a sponsor or a support person that you actually want to give a heads up to so that they're available for your spouse after you leave. That's not codependent. We're talking about doing this from a place of compassion and what's best, because what's best for your spouse is going to be best for you and the children as well. And what does your spouse need? And is there something that you can do to help set them up to have the support? And then for you, what do you do? If I'm telling Saturday morning and I know that they are triggered and reactive, maybe you have a place for you and the children to go to Saturday night and into Sunday until Sunday night, giving space. And so you want to think about, What do I know about my spouse? What do I know about what would be best? And I will say the most important thing is at this point, your mind starts saying, well, I'm not going to take the kids because then they'll assume that I'm taking the kids. And that's a really bad way to start. You have to do what's best for the children. So they may have an assumption or an interpretation about what you do that, oh my God, he or she is already like taking control of the kids and locking me out. That might be a story. But if what is best for your children is to be away from their other parent while their other parent goes through the emotional process of anger and depression and breaking things or drinking or whatever that might look like, your number one responsibility is to keep the children safe. So you want to think about, okay, when do I tell? And what do I do for the kids? Some people have the kids going to various friends for a sleepover for a night or two for the weekend. Some people rent an Airbnb and everyone goes there and leaves the marital home for the spouse who was told to process. And so all of these baby steps you want to be thinking about. The other thing that you want to know is what grief looks like. And so in the show notes is a link to another podcast that we've done on processing and understanding grief. And so you may have grief. Your children at this point probably don't know what's going on. Because they certainly shouldn't be told before the other parent, but you may be grieving and the other parent may very well be grieving. It is so important that you understand what the faces of grief look like, because you can misinterpret your spouse's grief as being manipulative, about gaslighting, about all of these things, when in truth, they're a human being who just got the worst possible news, probably news that they don't want. And so they're really triggered and reactive. And so understanding grief is really important. And now a couple of caveats. The truth is, none of this might happen. You might plan everything. And I had a client, I think I worked with her for a year and a half before she was ready to tell, because she was sure when she told, the roof was going to blow off of the house and there was going to be emotional shrapnel flying everywhere. And this has to be 7, 8 years ago. And I remember it like it was yesterday. She went down to the basement and she finally mustered up the courage to say, I've decided to divorce. I've hired an attorney and I think it's time we move on. And of all of the reactions she expected, he turned around and he said, yeah, it does seem like it's time. I'll find an attorney. And it was so anticlimactic. And she was like, oh my God, I took so much time waiting. So when you're ready, don't wait out of fear, because this piece, it's just every step that we take grows us, strengthens us, clarifies things for the next step that comes after that. On the other hand, I thought, finally, I told, thank God that's behind me. And it wasn't behind me. And so for those of you who have a certain type of spouse, I have a few clients right now. I didn't tell once. I didn't tell twice. I told a dozen times. And every time I told, I got the same reaction of shock and devastation. And so my spouse was very deeply rooted in denial. I didn't know that. I accused him of manipulation, control, and everything else, when in fact, he could not do this. He was 100% in denial. I had a guy, my mom convinced me, 1,000 other things. And I had the conversation over and over again. Now, I've had some clients who've also had the conversation many times, but for a different reason. Because over the course of, let's say, a 25-year marriage, they have gone to their spouse and proclaimed that they were going to divorce many times, a half a dozen times. And if your actions are not aligned with your words, and if you've already made this proclamation numerous times, why would your spouse expect today to be different? And there's so many variations to this telling between your personality, your fear of conflict, their personality, the level of conflict in the relationship in general, who's conflict avoidant, who's passive aggressive. So this is meant to give you a scaffolding of what to think about. And so again, what we talked about was, what is the goal of telling? The goal of telling is to share the decision. It is a proclamation, not a conversation, not a dialogue, not a defense. You want to say and keep it in the eye. And the other piece that I would give is a communication skill, sandwich approach, which I would highly recommend, which is, we've been together for X number of years. We've brought beautiful human beings into the world, and I'm deeply grateful for that. That's the button, the softness on the front. We've been at this a long time. I've decided that I'm moving forward with the divorce. That's the meat in the middle. I know how much you love the children, and I'm hoping that we can be really beautiful co-parents together and navigate this with as much grace and dignity as possible. And there you go. That was a 30, 60, 90-second proclamation. That's it. You've said everything that you have to say. And then you have to get quiet. And if being quiet is hard, work on that. Just hold the silence, bite your tongue, pinch your skin, play with a rock. Don't speak. Let them have the floor. You've completed the statement that you wanted to present. I would love to hear questions. So you can email info@journeybeyonddivorce.com if you're interested in a coaching call to learn more about our support. The Rapid Relief Call link is in the show notes, so you can go to rapidreliefcall.com and book a call, and we can support you in figuring out this piece as well as everything else that we can come alongside you and support you in. And so I am wishing you clarity, strength, confidence, and succinctness as you enter this conversation. And I'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.